The option to update a form, either admin or side view, with a selected given parameters so that certain fields are adapted just by a click of a button that takes them to the form, is a very valuable feature and is also available in JCB. I'm going to demonstrate to you how to get this done. Before I do though, there are two things you need to know. One of them is that there already is off the shelf the option to do this with at least one field without having to code anything. So if you have one field which is a list field, or if it's a text field, I think there are some limitations to what type of fields could be targeted. I haven't actually tried them all, but I'm sure that if you run into bugs or limitations and open a issue on GitHub, we could fix that. So just let me know. But to demonstrate the first off-the-shelf, easy implementive option would be to first take you to the code and show you where it all's happening. Okay, so I'm going to compile the demo component and then just go look at the code here. Okay, so now let's see the code. Okay, so going to demo component model and opening a look model, which is the editing view of the look on the front end of this component. We're going to scroll down to a place called, well, a function actually called getForm. So here it starts, getForm. Now it's in the getForm function that a lot of things happen, like validation, the access to certain fields and so forth. All of that is happening here because if the user doesn't have access, we don't even need to, do anything. So we just dump the field right here. Now you'll see at the very end of the method there is this only load these value if no ID is found. So that means when a field is for some, if there's a new look being created from the front and there is no ID, so there is a value ref and ref ID that some of you may be familiar with, which basically grabs a string from the ref and also grabs an integer, and these two values are things that are busy passing away. We are that whole referral structure, we've moved JCB to instead use the return value, and so although this still exists all around it and it's still active, I would suggest that you don't use it because eventually I think we'll just drop it. And the replacement is field and field ID. So you can actually tell JCB off the bat that this field, and then that would basically mean the field's name. So if the field's name is product or whatever, and then what ID you want to have selected, because this is targeting a list field. So there's a list of, let's say, products in a list field, and so the result in this value should then be basically product, like that, and result in this field will eventually be something like already this feature to change the actual field value. I don't know, does that all make sense to you? So you can already in your URL, because this information here is taken from a URL, you can already add a value called field, which then equals the field name, and then add a value called field ID, which equals the ID you want selected, and that would automatically set the value. Now that's only for one field. So we realized, okay, well, we may want to do this for more than one field. So in the interface, we go to admin views and we open the look, which is where we may want to do more. We can scroll down and we'll see a place called get form. So we can say we are here and save this, where you would then be able to add more. And so it tells you that the array data, the load, the form, and the ID is all here, how you access those. And you can add your own implementation of what I've just shown you. So let's save this and compile so we can show you where this ends up. So you see we are here. This is where that code ends up. So you could literally come in here, grab this, and basically copy it in here. Just again, make sure you want the ID to be there, and add your own. Now you can decide what this must be. So you could say, okay, whatever you like, and obviously you don't need this. And that was just because we are actually, this obviously is the default, so we'll just make that null, and then here we'll just say 0, and we change this also to something that is generic. Now with these values in your URL, you can update this redirect. Now you can change this from a string to, or you can make a comma separating. I mean, you know how to pass values through a URL, and so doing this you can set the stage of the form with predetermined selective options very easily. I hope this makes sense to you. If you have any questions, please leave any comments in the video comments area, or go to the forum and let me know. So that's how easy it is to target. Now maybe just for making sure we're on the same page, this one here needs to be the field name. Now how do we know what is the field name? If you open the form, and for this we open look XML, which is where the form exists, it's this value, name. So you can choose this name. I would suggest that you would be careful in what type of fields you allow to be edited through the URL, so that your form doesn't become hackable somehow, exposing data it shouldn't, or overriding data. Well, there are actually catches to validate whether a form is allowed to be submitted by the specific user. That is in place in the controller. It does do a validation. So if you, for example, here look in the controller, there is allow edit, allow add and allow edit, and it does check whether this user, this current user, has access to the look area, and to this specific ID, of course, and then it continues to check whether it has edit access. So all that is already in place, and so adding this dynamic updating of your value in the fields shouldn't be that risky, but I still like to be careful. So I would think, for example, if we wanted to change something here, let's see what field could be done. Maybe this name field. So we could change that to name. So we know that it should be name. So over here we could change this to field name, like that. And so we could do some validation. if it's name, then only should it actually continue. And then here, because we're also grabbing a string, we can do some string sanitation. Make sure that this is a string. Capitals. And we also do a null here. And then we can say field default, like that. And we can also now validate this to being a string. So we can grab the helper method. I mean, you do know that most components, it has a helper class, and the helper class has a whole lot of methods that ships by default. And one of the very useful method that is here, besides many others, is this check string. Is to check whether a string is a string and it's actually got value in it. Now you could write this out every time, this little validation, or you could just go, check string like that, and obviously the helper class like that. So demo helper check string. So you can validate that this string has a value, and then only use these values to update your field that you're targeting. And so that way you can add a value to a field through the URL quite easily. Now I could demonstrate this on the front for you for just quick demonstration. So very quickly, I have a little look value. I added one here from the front end. Now we want to actually be able to create a new one from the front. So we're going to have to make a little change here to the looks view. We'll have to add a link here to create, or a button that says create, and we'll have to do that with over here. So here we do a can do get actions. We only need to check whether it can create. We then do look create, and we also let's rather use the user object. It is on the page. We don't need to actually go through all the trouble of checking the action, because we're not even working with an ID. We just want to see if the user is allowed to create. So we use the component name, and this view look is the one where we're going to be creating. See, it's there. So we'll use that as the area to validate, create a look. And then we create our little button, and we're using some UIKit classes up here for our button. You could obviously do your own thing. And if you can't create, then just no string, just an empty string. And then in the default view area, we basically gonna just echo the create link. Okay, so this is just to get a create button on the page. We haven't come to the field thing yet. We'll do that in a moment. Let's just show you the button on the page. Okay, so now having compiled and installed, there is now create look. The pencil is not that ideal. We should change it to something else. So if you click on it, it actually gives you the option to create a look. There we go. And this is what we expect. Now what we want to do is we want to add a value to this field here by default, so that if they click on that link, it automatically adds a value. That's just as a demonstration. We could do that with any text field and any list field. So going back to the admin view, we're going to make sure we got everything set up right for this catch. So in the getForm method, we now have a validation here to make sure it's a new item. Then we're going to use this YHY, just generic, we can use anything, and we know that must be just a word, no string there. Then we're going to do YHY value, and this is going to be a string, and we're going to check the string like we said we're doing, and we're going to check that the field name is not null, and then only we're going to update that value. So we can just say now set field default value. Okay, so we're going to save this and compile, and then run a few tests. Okay, I've installed it, so I'm going to add now, without adding it to the link, just as a demonstration in the URL, I'm going to type some value and press enter, and now we see it loads up with that new value in place, and so it works. So we set the Y and Y to name and this value to James. If we left it empty like that and clicked, it will just be empty. So it is giving us the expected result. Now we can go back to our site view where we have our link, and we can decide, maybe the user has a name, we want to add that name automatically if he clicks the link. So let's do that. So we've added the field is name, the value will be based on the user name, or actually the name, and if there is none set, it will just return an empty string. And so we've got that set up. Let's save this and install. So now if I go over the button and I look here at the bottom of the screen, it actually shows my name in there. You see it? Now if I click the button, now I ran into a little trouble here, and we'll have to maybe look at this. But if you remember, the way we built this URL in the back end, we passed it through a task. We didn't actually use this URL. We actually used view, look, and then task, look, edit, and that's how we passed it. And this is because then we will have a redirecting validation right here. But doing that, it was dumping these values and it wasn't passing it through to the form. I went and then adapted this URL to actually use this URL instead. So basically did this, copied that, came back here and just updated our URL like that, and it still worked, and now it was passing the values through. Now I'll need to test this a little more to be absolutely sure that this is not going to cause some other headaches, but that is working. I'm logged in the back end at the moment of this, well, in the front end at the moment as an administrator, so I'll have to log in as a lesser permission individual and see how it behaves then. But if we click look now, it passes the value right to the field like we've anticipated based on these parameters that we've added, and it doesn't remove them. So this is what you would want, and this is working. I'm just not sure how this will relate down to those with less permission on the system. And this tutorial is getting too long to actually spend time on that now. So you'll have to play around with this. If you run into something that's quite obviously a problem, please let me know. Well, thanks for watching.